at sites, just go to infiniteplane.live. That is the direct route. It will take you directly to where you can access the primary YouTube channel, which has the chat feature. I'm likely going to reintegrate Discord, as much as we hate them, but we have to go where the people are. Not that I'm specifically fishing for neo-Nazi incels, but Discord has some great features, and we made it better just for being there. Okay, so if you're listening here, I want to go ahead and first check the audio. I remember now the issue we had last time. The audio was kind of popping. It's almost safe to assume that we're having audio issues right off the bat, which means I should probably do a backup recording with decent audio. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm waiting to see if there's any feedback as far as the audio. How low is it? We'll see how bad it is. If it's not terrible, I will proceed. If it is terrible, I'm going to make an adjustment. How is the audio? I could probably check it on a secondary device. It is decent. You can hear me? That's the main thing. You can hear me. Okay, well then we'll just deal with it. We'll deal with it. I could send out live stream notifications, but it's not that we're on shaky ground, but we're still doing a lot of tests. And I did send out an email with the new phone number, which is active as of right now. So let's just go ahead and proceed as though everything is in perfect working order. We are joined here by Lando Rock, Elephant Tusks. By the way, this is July the 26th, 2023, Infinite Plane Radio, open phones for open minds. You can get on the D program by joining us on Skype. Just search Infinite Plane Radio or call 1-505-349-0420. Easy to remember, and it's at the top of my Twitter profile. Elephant Tusk says, did you see Nathan from Lift the Veil was battling a dark spirit and ended up in a mental institution? No, I actually didn't see that coming. He seems very sane. Although, he does delve into some very dark stuff as far as believing a lot of these conspiracy theories. Like, that could be very stressful. I want to stress here that we are a group of non-believers. We're consistently debunking the Psy War, and it doesn't just exist on the mainstream media stage. It exists in the alt media. Most of those red pills are tainted with mental fentanyl. That's probably what got him. I hope he's doing better. Joined by Penguinotti, Rocco Calzone. Ready or Not 31 says audio levels good. Yes, we're on 3 YouTube channels again. I want to make sure we send out a strong signal. Roxy W, Phase Polarizer, thanks for joining. Okay, so this is actually turning out to be a very productive day. I want to say thanks to all the supporters of the think tank. Thanks to Cope. We just got our business insurance. We got the phones. We have enough shelving to get all the inventory off the floor and into organized compartments. And I think we have a very bright future ahead, and this is ground zero. So again, everything seems to be working. We're moving from crawl into walk. As of right now, we're officially walking. We're going to move into the run phase probably within the next week. It won't take us that long. I just needed to get a few things in order, but I live in a 1-minute city. I can routinely make these live streams occur without interruptions on a schedule to where I won't have to blast out text alerts. We will just know. Elephant Tusk says, what are your thoughts on the cicada group? Yeah, that cicada thing was some kind of augmented reality game analogous to QAnon. And I think that it originates in the same circles. I think there's some overlap there. And interestingly, the people who are obsessed with the cicada phenomenon, some kind of online interactive mystery thing, were the same ones that try to hook me on Q. They passed me the Q pipe. And I'm like, no thanks. I don't trust anonymous sources. And they said, but it's the deep state. And the white hats are taking them out, which is all just phony as Sound of Freedom. Nobody's talking about Sound of Freedom anymore. Is it because it got suppressed? No, it's because the hype machine is over. It was just hype. Unless anyone here still believes the story there. But, you know, maybe Tim Ballard isn't a Mason. That's not really the point. The point is that the disingenuous PR campaign target marketing the QAnon, pretending not to be Q, and Trump is retruthing hardcore Q drops. And so if you think these Q drops are nothing, just to put it in context, they recreated, by design, this is all intentional, they recreated the radical Islamic terrorist threat for the domestic violent extremists here. Like they created the equivalent. The Quran radicals became the QAnon radicals. They're trying to contact trace what mosques you went to, 20 years ago. Well, it's all just been updated. This whole system has been updated. And they're looking at incels in basements instead of radicals in caves. But it's the same program. And I'm just saying that the Q verses that Trump is retweeting are a call to arms. He's basically calling his terrorists to action. From the perspective of, I think, anthropology, this is just stochastic violence. It's giving permission to the mob to act out his will. Not that I think anything's going to happen that's real or organic, but they set the stage so it's believable. And then they pull it off with a psyop with some terrible crisis actors. And I'm wondering about them. Do we need to pray for the crisis actors? I realize Hollywood actors have gone on strike and they have representation with a guild, the Screen Actors Guild, but who represents the gags? If the Government Actors Guild crisis actors all get replaced by digital deepfakes, who's going to speak up for them? It's like they're going to be out of work. Now, if you want to talk about the Cicada Group, if you have any additional insights, I know Lynn Ertel has a lot to say about it. We talked about it once. The number is, again, and this is the permanent number, 1-505-349-0420. And a couple of other things about the phone system. It's going to be something to enable consistent conversations, group chats, live, and even when I'm not live. If we have a replay going and someone has a little bit of time to talk, I can just use my phone and record the calls the same exact way without interrupting if need be. But again, we're going to be more active on the phones, doing conferences. And if you follow on Skype, if you get in the Skype groups, it'll be a lot easier to facilitate phone calls if you have something specific you want to get in on. You don't have to try to call in when there's an open minute. I can just have you in queue. So I am using Skype as a form of caller queue, which was the main feature I was seeking. Okay, continuing. So many things to talk about. Let me go through my minds. Breaking, Jason Aldean edits video to remove Antifa BLM scenes. Wait a minute, I thought the video had nothing to do with BLM. I thought it had nothing to do with Antifa. You see how disingenuous these right-wing provocateurs are? And remember, Jason Aldean, Illuminati playing card, tattoo of a Joker and an ace, JA91. His initials, JA. Harvest Festival 9/1, Vegas 10/1/2017. This guy was front row on the stage during a major league fake shooting that really should have been deconstructed and thrown away with Sandy Hook. But unfortunately, Q said it was the deep state. And suddenly, a lot of people who are already up to par with auto-hoaxing started taking stuff seriously again. That was such a pivotal moment. That's when I realized, okay, the red pill has been co-opted by the fringe GOP. They're basically turning them into Republicans, which is what happened. Like, pre-Q, most of the people that we communicated with, that I'm familiar with, that we talk about, when we say the conspiracy community or whatever, the truthers, most of them had already said, okay, politics is obviously a charade. If they're all in the same fictional universe where moon landings are real, for example, or nukes, if that's the case, then it's a big charade. Politics is a charade. But suddenly they took it seriously again because what they did, and this was clever, what the government PSYOP operatives did is they created this religion called Q, which co opted conspiracies in general and wrapped it up into this mega conspiracy. But, and this is what one of the cicada operatives who contacted me about this, who tried to get me into it, he said, you need to stop talking about conspiracies. That's negative. You got to talk about prospiracies because there are good guys behind the scenes fighting the bad guys. So the story is not new, just repackaged. By the way, if you follow me on Twitter at the very top, again, you can see that the phone number and the Skype join link is there right on top. And I think we just passed 2,000 subscribers. Still banned from Spaces. Now, if you're not familiar with this Jason Aldean video, basically the gist of it, a country music video tried this in a small town, and it was a call out to BLM. And it actually included scenes from Black Lives Matter peaceful protests. Additionally, it was centered around a courthouse known for some lynching that happened in 1927. And this coming out and being number one on iTunes created some outrage. And all these right-wing pundits, from friend of Jason Aldean, Candace Owen, think about that, Candace Owen. You know she's just an operative. She's a government troll. She says she's friends with Jason Aldean, and it's ridiculous to think his video had anything to do with lynching. I mean, just total gaslighting. I listened to her podcast. She gaslights her followers. And they all say this has nothing to do with BLM. But now he edits the video. Ready or Not 31 says, did you watch Lift the Veil last night? He was on DLive rambling and ranting about the cicada program, saying he was the one who solved it. I see. I'll have to go back and re-examine this cicada thing. I was somewhat intrigued by it, but I recognized this was some kind of alternate reality game, and I think it might have been some kind of a dry run or precursor for the whole Q thing, which is far from over. Oh, by the way, if you haven't been following this, there's this disturbing trend among Save the Children types, the whole Sound of Freedom, where they're manufacturing like illegal content and then attributing it to Hunter Biden's laptop and posting it on Twitter. And I've been flagging these channels left and right. Well, one of them, disturbingly, put Michelle Obama's head on a nude baby to say he was born a male. I mean, that was the whole, quote, joke. And they never get tired of it. And I'm like, wait, this is on a very popular Instagram channel. Thousands of people retweeting it. These are the same people who say, we got to save the exploited children. Well, here they are manufacturing child exploitation and laughingly sharing it. And I have to be the sensible person to wander into the mob and say, hey, you realize that you're part of the problem. You're actually not even solving it. You're just sick and twisted child abuse fetishists at this point, which is why I've been calling them MAGA X. But anyway, one main Q channel, Dom Lucra, was actually suspended from Twitter for this, and I flagged his stuff. I don't know if I did it, but a lot of people got flagged. And Elon Musk tweeted, he said, the reason for this suspension should be shown along with the ability to appeal. There are many layers of this software, and it's much harder than it should be. This account was suspended for posting child exploitation. So I'm just saying, I have a point. The ones who are supposedly fighting it online are actually engaging in it. And it's just a little sick. By the way, we're getting very close to August the 4th, 216th day of the year, President Obama's birthday. President Obama's in the news because his cook recently turned up dead in a shallow pool, despite being an extraordinary swimmer. I'm sure it has nothing to do with burnt hot dogs. Okay, so no one says, I've been researching some of this cicada stuff for the past few years. Yeah, why don't you call in if you care to? The number is 1-505-349-0420. I should have left that number open for one of the many, many, many dispensaries cropping up everywhere. They're popping up like weeds. I don't know if it's like that where you are, but it's like every other gas station is shut down and turned into a 24-hour delivery, like weed dispensary. What is going on? Like you can't separate the drugs that are being distributed from the Psywar itself. Like I've noticed there's an uptick on sugarless energy drinks loading people up on like mega doses of B12. And you combine that with the other and everything else, and I think, well, maybe they're preparing us for something. Okay, so if you just called, I got confused and I tried to answer on my smartphone. And I was wondering if this was going to happen, if it's going to ring on both, and if I have the option. So thanks for letting me test it. And I do. So I could take it offline. But if you want to call right back, I will answer this time. And I'm also going to have to extend it from 5 seconds to 15 for when it goes to voicemail. But I tend to... Okay. Hey, caller, can you hear me all right?
Yo, is this Tim Osmond?
Yes. How are you this evening?
I'm good, man. This is Adam from formerly Freedom Free for All. I just thought I'd call in because I wanted to chat quickly about what you're talking about with partly the Sound of Freedom.
Oh, yes, Sound of Freedom. Yeah, what are your thoughts on Sound of Freedom beyond what I've said? It's multi-layered, but have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, and my take on it is a little bit different. You know, first of all, Tim Ballard is a CIA agent, okay? And so once a CIA agent, always a CIA agent, right? It's not like he just left the organization and went on some missions to do some things. No, he's always working there. You know, it's kind of that seems to me to be the obvious part, but some of the not so obvious parts. You've probably seen the picture of him with the tie with the Freemason.
Yeah, look, I saw that, and he tried to deny
the
it.
compass
But
in the square.
yes, but the thing is, let's say he's not a Mason. He is very much connected with the Mormons, and this whole film company is too. And there's another man named Ballard who's one of the disciples of the Mormon Church who had Tim Ballard, rescue a child who was kidnapped from a LDS church in Haiti, and that's what got him really started. So he got his start at the behest of some high-ranking Mormon. And that Mormon claims to be a descendant of Joseph Smith. Fascinating connection there, but if you look into the Mormon symbolism, they actually use Freemasonic symbols and oaths within their endowments. You can't even separate them. So he can say he's not a Mason, but if you're a Mormon and you're in the inner sanctum, if you're in their temple, you're pretty much a Freemason. There's really no distinction, if you ask me.
Well, my grandfather was a Freemason. I actually inherited his ring, which is a compass and a square on a black circle in a gold ring, right? And my parents went to a Mormon church, so there might be a connection there. I'm not an expert, but I saw an interview with Jim Caviezel, the guy that played Tim Ballard in the film. Obviously, everyone knows he played Jesus Christ in the Passion of the Christ, directed by Mel Gibson, who's also connected to this film, Sound of Freedom. And he said in this interview that he was talking on the phone with Mel Gibson about like he wanted to play the role, and he said that my initials are JC, and I'm 33.
Oh my
at the
goodness.
time when.
Oh.
Yeah, at the time when and Mel Gibson said, "Dude, you're freaking me out," and he hung up the phone. And then from that point forward, he was cast as Jesus Christ in the film Passion.
Okay, this is incredible. This is incredible because I'm always talking about how they use actors that have an attached gravitas because of previous roles, and the fact that he was Jesus Christ and associated with Mel Gibson, exactly, and then Mel Gibson is already in the QAnon's mind, the Q cult. They see him
Yep.
as fighting the pedos and the deep state in Hollywood. So it's
Or,
like it's a match made.
or
It's
they
perfectly
do.
made, and the fact that he was 33 and they mentioned it, I haven't seen that,
Yep.
but I'm gonna look it up because that's
Okay, well,
typical.
I can send you the link. I don't know how to right now, but I bet you anything that Mel Gibson is a fucking liar and a fraud and probably one of the biggest like P LGBTP, you know what I mean, on the circuit. So so I watched this movie because I love horror films, and my favorite movie of all time is The Exorcist. Right, William Peter Blatty and William Friedkin wrote the. That's my favorite movie of all time. But I thought because the reason why I so first thing you need to know is when you go on YouTube and you see Sound of Freedom videos everywhere, you know that's your first clue that it's a fucking fraud. Something's up. You know, you like your alarm bell should go off. Why is every single channel on YouTube getting away with promoting this film? Like, YouTube is controlled narrative. So it's not a fucking, you know,
Well,
trying
look,
to
Trump
expose pedophilia or
Trump watched
whatever.
it. He watched it
Oh,
publicly.
Trump watched it. Oh, sure,
He
yeah.
watched it at Bedminster, right? And then afterward, he said in a speech that he's going to kill child traffickers, execute them. This is just a reboot of the original Q. They're just trying to reboot it
Right.
without the whole
And
negative branding.
he never did anything in the first place. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So
you
what
mean
I'm
he
saying.
didn't?
So check this out.
He didn't save the children?
So check this out. The reason why I found this movie, the reason why, okay, so it led up, it was before. So before The Sound of Freedom came out, I'm a big fan of The Exorcist, right? So this YouTube suggested to me this video on about, it was a Catholic priest, and he was talking about exorcisms. And he was saying that the most realistic film he'd ever seen about exorcism was this movie called Nefarious. Okay? And the reason why he said it was the most accurate depiction of a demonic possession is because there's no blood and guts or none of that bullshit Hollywood crap. The movie Nefarious is about a dialogue about this guy it reminds me of the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. So I'm watching this movie Nefarious, and I'm like, wow, this is really good because this is truly an accurate depiction about how demonic possession works. Now, I've seen this interview with Jim Caviezel, just like the same one I told you before. And in this interview, he is Nefarious. He is Screw Tape. Jim Caviezel is a demon. Like, I don't know, you might say demon, like, forget about the word demon. But he is fucking wild, bro. You know, so he starts out in this interview, he says, I don't want to make movies with Hollywood that have anything to do with, like, bad stuff or, like, evil or, like, I don't want to swear in movies. And then, like, 2 minutes later, he says the word shit.
Well, okay, let me run this by you because
So I know he's a liar.
This whole movie is produced by this company Angel, which is very much connected with religious stuff, and the Mormons pre-censor their movies. They chop out the bad words and all this stuff. But let me run this by you. So Jim Caviezel, who is a big believer in adrenochrome and all this stuff, and then Tim Ballard believes in Wayfair. Like, you can order expensive cabinets and a kid will be delivered to you. But anyway, Jim
Okay.
Caviezel tells Trump, I'm still Jesus, but you're Moses. Did you hear about that? Trump got promoted from Jesus Christ to Moses from April to July, just a few months.
Yeah. Jim Caviezel was saying in this interview that I saw that he actually saw Jesus, and Jesus said that he was going to come into him and play the role for the Passion of the Christ.
Okay, someone just sent me this. There's an image from the Passion of the Christ where after he gets his beat down, and I haven't seen it, but he's got one of his eyes shut, one eye open. You know, the typical symbolism. Like, it's all there with Jim Caviezel. He's flashing all the signs. How they think that he and Mel Gibson aren't in the club is just beyond me. But they're gullible.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but the truthers these days who are sharing this stuff, if they're not paid shills, they're just going with the bandwagon. They're not
Well,
saving kids. They're not rescuing kids from
sheep,
tunnels.
the sheep always follow the other sheep, you know, and it's like um, it should be so obvious, man. Like when the movie came out, you go on YouTube and like everybody was doing it for likes, you know, likes and clicks and hits, and everybody and it was like, whoa, dude,
Oh,
there's something going
it
on.
was virtue signaling, and I mean, we dissected this movie. I watched it. I went to the theater because I wanted to see it for myself, and I can tell that what they did is they did a lot of grassroots marketing, reverse psychology. They don't want you to see it. They're going to shut off the air conditioning, and a lot of this was
Right.
TikTok MAGA patriot influencers who came out of nowhere, usually attractive people, and all of a sudden they have 20,000 subs on TikTok, and they're talking about how they try to watch the movie and somebody put nanobots in their drinks. Like it was really a lot of hype, and it worked because I think they beat Indiana Jones for a weekend.
Yeah, nanobots in their drinks. Like that's ridiculous.
Oh yes, no, this is vintage. This is like vintage QAnon stuff from
Right.
2015.
Exactly. See, it allows them the window. It opens the window for them to go in and out and start with the deep conspiracy theories to demonize anyone who would say, wait a second, Tim Ballard's a CIA agent and a Freemason, and Jim Caviezel has, like, in my opinion, questionable. You know what they call, like, method acting,
Yes.
right? When they bring in the spirit of someone else and they act it out. That's exactly what's going on. Jim Caviezel said he saw Jesus. Like, isn't that like wouldn't you literally be put in a straitjacket and put in a white room if you said that, oh, I had a conversation with Jesus? Like if I said that to the cops
He
or
could
whatever,
be
they would throw me in a fucking insane asylum.
he could be a true megalomaniac. He could actually see himself in some bigger context. I mean, who knows?
He
You know,
is, man. He is, like, he's a totally a narcissistic megalomaniac, probably a psychopath, and likely an LGBTP, whatever, you know what the P stands for, right?
yeah, you know what?
So,
That's something else
and
too.
look at
If we're
Mel
looking at
Gibson, right?
look, are we looking at controlled opposition to actual child trafficking? I kind of think so.
Yes, because see what happens is if it were true, what they would say would be all of the proceeds are going towards, preventing this. But no, 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 no. All the proceeds are going in Mel Gibson's fucking back pocket. You know?
Yes,
Like, where are
yes.
the proceeds? Where's all the profits going? Are they saying that they're setting up a GoFundMe to fucking, like, go take down
Okay,
another big thing?
here's something else that really
No,
bothers
no.
me. Here's something else that's really got under my skin here is that the people promoting this are trying to associate it with Hunter Biden's laptop, and they're sharing pictures of Hunter and his niece, and they're making up like really twisted fan fiction to make it seem like they have uncovered what we saw in Sound of Freedom right there in the Biden's family. And to me, it's just this collective delusion that's overtaken the MAGAs. And it's like, I'm sorry, but there hasn't been any evidence for this underground railroad of children being trafficked for their adrenochrome. It never really panned out. I mean, what are your thoughts on adrenochrome? Do you think it's all a, I don't know, a metaphor for loosh, or do you think they're actually harvesting in some disgusting ways, some kind of like fluids out of tortured children? Like that just sounds like fantasy, like blood libel. What do you think?
That's a complicated one. I grew up in a place called Victoria, BC, and there's a very famous book called Michelle Remembers. And in that book, a little girl named Michelle in Victoria was, her mother and parents were into Satanism or whatever. And the book describes about how they, like, tortured her to try to, and I'm like, yeah, okay, on one hand, I get it. But on the other hand, it's like you got Sandra Bullock's, Bullock's meaning bulls, balls. She's probably a man, right? Talking on the Ellen DeGenerate show about how she uses, like, little boys' fucking
What?
him to put cream on her face, and it's complicated.
Wait. What was the other one? Demi
Um,
Moore. There's a video of Demi Moore, like full on making out with some 14-year-old while someone else in the room is singing "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," and I think everybody's inebriated. And I'm like, did anybody ever find that kid? Like, like I can't deny there's some weird, sick stuff, and they're all definitely pushing a lot of lines like way too fast, and it's freaking people out. But I kind of think that the QAnon thing discredits the reality of it. For example, I think it
well,
offers a false
well,
hope that we can get rid of this particular evil when it's actually just too widespread and institutionalized.
well. Look at Tom Cruise. He just released a movie called the newest Mission Impossible. I don't know what it's called, but and in classic form, Tom Cruise often performs his own stunts, right? And a couple of years ago, there was a Top Gun movie just came out with Tom Cruise, and I was like, whatever, 16 when the first freaking Top Gun movie came out, and since then I look old. I'm deteriorated. I'm losing hair, and I got gray fucking hair, right? But Tom Cruise looks like it's almost the same as he did when the Top Gun movie came out when I was 16. So how do you do that? And might I add that Tom Cruise was cast as the lead protagonist in Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice, literally a movie about vampires. So
Yeah.
whether you
Okay.
believe that vampires suck blood or drink adrenochrome, I've got a book called the Omnibus of Vampires, and it talks about vampirism through the ages, and
Okay.
many vampiric tales throughout European history have nothing to do with drinking blood. But what it had to do with was like absorbing energy,
Yes.
different ways of like, it wasn't just absorbing blood, but it was always about immortality, and it was about sucking your soul or your energy
Okay,
or
this is
whatever.
why I was asking you. Do you think maybe it's just a metaphor for loosh extraction? And hey, look, Elephant Tusks in the chat mentions that he was in Vanilla Sky, where he dies at 33. He's brought back, but it's about Life Extension, a company called LE, and he was basically selling his soul for eternal life. But you're right, there's something about it, and it's Interview with
Oh yeah,
the
Tom
Vampire.
Cruise was in that movie Eternal Sky. Yeah,
You are
that's a trip. Yeah, good call.
Yeah, an Interview with the Vampire. Apparently, it's a Manduzel effect. And hey, one more point. Bram Stoker, the guy who wrote Dracula, he was in the Golden Dawn, and Golden Dawn, of course, the Thelemic cult. And so the line that Dracula says, "The blood is the life," is pretty much right out of that person's frame of reference. And I think he knew something. And yeah, I don't think it's about literal blood. I think it's about some kind of energetic extraction, very parasitic and
That's
vampiric.
weird because I just saw a trailer on IMDb today about a new Exorcist movie that's coming out, and it's got like a white girl it's kind of a remake of the original Exorcist, William Peter Blatty, and but there's also a black girl, so they're trying to make it more accessible, you know, to the quote unquote reimagining, right? So, but
Oh, isn't that interesting how
but the girl
look,
says the
it's not
exact same thing, that life is the blood. The little girl who gets possessed, she says the exact same thing. The life is the blood.
now, are you saying that the possessed girl is black?
There's a white girl and a possessed girl. For some reason, they had to like kind of, make, because I guess it was too intense
Oh,
for
'cause I
the
noticed
black
that look,
alone, so they had to
no,
mix it a bit, make it a little bit go.
there's always
'cause
these
that,
fake controversies, like the Little Mermaid's black or something, and it's like, are you guys even watching this? I noticed that the conservative right is always ready to pounce on any kind of change to traditional characters, and it's all just culture war. And they're always swapping male for female, they're swapping races, and it has nothing to do with
right.
being inclusive so much as I think it's just provocation. And I also think The Exorcist falls into this because I think that the way that they marketed the pandemic appeals to the left and to their fears and their belief
Sure.
system. But the right is still influenced by the traditional version of the pandemic, which was, of course, sin and social contagion. And I think they need to bring out The Exorcist again to hype up the OG devil, because COVID's the new devil that the atheists believe in. But it doesn't surprise me to see The Exorcist coming out again, especially because Jack Posobiec, who's a huge name in Pizzagate, recently did an exorcism of those satanic nuns at Dodgers Stadium, and he's been hyping up this satanic panic thing endlessly. So I'm just like, this is just more culture war stuff, as you'll probably see.
I mean, as long as it's divide and conquer, yeah, it's good to go, right?
Yeah, I mean,
You
look,
know,
pick your whatever makes you feel better, holy water or hand sanitizer. It just depends if you're more sciency or more religious.
exactly. Which is why the last like couple of weeks, I've really come to a solid conclusion that I'm gonna embrace my pagan Celtic roots because I'm just sick of like the Yahwism, Muslim, Catholic, Judaism, fucking Christian bullshit.
You're talking
You
about
know,
Abrahamic
like
faiths, right? Right. I understand.
because all they do is real estate acquisition. That's all they do. Mormons, Jehovah Witnesses, fucking well, Jews are a bit different,
Now,
but
now,
like
what are you saying when you say
most
pagan?
of them, all they do is buy real estate, and they don't care if you're white or black or Chinese or whatever.
Are you embracing like
Whatever.
astrology? What are you embracing? Runes, magic, like
I'm embracing the classical. Okay, for me, I'm not Germanic. I'm not Scandinavian. I'm not Slovakian, right? I'm personally Celtic. That's my roots. So I'm embracing my Celtic pagan roots. But even Germanics and Slovakians and Scandinavians are also pagan.
now, does it
So
bother you though that
look at
no,
it,
look, listen,
even if
if you're celebrating your pagan rites and you're going by the sun, you're going by the moon, the seasons, you're going to be celebrating the high points of your pagan year on the same days that the elite are scheduling their major psyops. Like you might notice a correspondence. You're going to go celebrate Candlemas just as they do the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? It's like what I'm saying is
yeah.
that we live in a pagan system anyway, if you want to call it that, because the
And that's okay as long as we don't watch the Super Bowl, but instead what we do is we think about the changing of the seasons and the animals and observe stuff, the way the flowers and the plants and the trees all move and change and it's not the, sure they can take like what was the word they can abscond with our traditions, which is obviously what they've been doing for thousands of years, right? Christianity is a big deal about that, right? Like they stole all our shit, and they're like, "Well, we don't want you to be like that anymore." And we're like, "Well, we want to be like this," and we fought, and there's a lot of bloodshed for thousands of years. It was like killing over it, right?
supposedly,
And a bunch of
supposedly,
people were like, "Oh, but yeah, we're gonna read the book, and we're gonna read the book, and look, here's a book, and here's a book," and it's like, no, we don't want a book. So here, I'll give you a great example. And this might sound racist, but don't take
wait,
it
wait,
as
no, wait.
racist.
Before you go on, this is the first phone call in the new system. I want to avoid the obvious stuff that the powers that be are looking to flag, which means anti-vax and racist. Like we could talk about chemtrails or mud flood, but we got to keep anything that's overtly racial. I mean, there are other platforms for that. I'm pretty sure, like BitChute. But anyway, I appreciate the call very much. This has been great.
Yeah,
I
man.
thank you, and hey, call back anytime.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate you, man. Bye.
Likewise, definitely, and appreciate you helping me test out the phones because it's a tricky night and it's the first time, so I think it went well. Thank you. Okay, and the one thing about it I don't like about Skype is the ringer, but what I'm going to do on the replays and in the archives, I'm going to actually go in and mute the ringer, which will be easy to do. I just look at the audio levels and I can just crop it. Appreciate the caller very much. Just want to look. I'm not a censor here, and we all know this, but what have I mean? We're all so familiar with all these different concepts and ideas. It's like, do we need to hear another 5G phobic ranting about mind control waves that or whatever it happens to be? It's like we've already been there. Like nobody cares if you noticed. Nobody cares that some guy went out and testified to Congress that yeah we have crashed alien craft, and they call them biologs, not biological entities, biologs. How many biologs were there? The pilots. I'm like, you're telling me you got some craft that can traverse the solar system and it crashes and they die? Like they don't have airbags, seat belts. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hey, Tim. Hey, this is the guy in chat who's talking about the cicada stuff.
Oh yes, please fill me or fill us in on the cicada because I kind of just glossed over it, but from what I understand, it was some kind of our alternate reality game involving people
Yeah,
and some anonymous kind of clue dropper.
it's that way on the surface. Before I get into it, I have some notes that I've taken like a few years ago, and I was wondering like where I need to send those, like to get them to you.
Oh, you can send it to me here on Skype if you can send me a link, text the number, or just email
Okay.
me. My email address is in the newsletter. So subscribe to the newsletter and just reply to it.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right. Well, about it being like an ARG, it is, but the Cicada 3301 stuff is one project but out of multiple by like a network of hackers. And these people are all involved in like 4chan, other image boards, and they go back to like the mid 2000s, and some go back into the 90s with stuff like the Anonymous and LulzSec. And how do I begin on this? I'm just gonna look through my notes.
Now, I'm familiar
So
with
the
Anonymous because I was exploring
yeah,
various cults and just getting hands on, like investigating. I was into everything I could get get into. For example, I was studying Dianetics and Scientology, and I wasn't just going
right,
to the books. I went to their org and I read their books there, and I was on their
right,
visitors logs. And then turns out this group Anonymous begins doxing Scientologists, putting all their secret doctrines on the internet, and
right,
I was targeted because they thought I was a Scientologist.
right,
So
right. Yeah.
I'm familiar with Anonymous and how they've kind of somehow grafted themselves onto the Q movement, kind of in a weird way with the 4chan.
Okay. So about the Q thing, from what I've heard, these people what they claim. So Cicada 3301 is tied into this thing called the Game 23 or TG 23. And it's another type of ARG where they feel like they can hack things into reality in real time using a hashtag system and botnets on Twitter and most big like social media sites. And how that gets into Q is they believe they're influencing this AI called Tyler, as in like Tyler from Fight Club. And they claim that this Tyler AI, with their influence, created Q. That Q is essentially like an AI. It was trying to like, I guess, influence the outer shell of politics, like the stuff we see on the surface.
Okay,
And
okay,
it's these people like exchanging, like server space, like these mind maps that you see, paste bin accounts, hashtag systems. Like, the average person, a lot of articles they wouldn't see, they try to like influence the public domain. And I don't know if this is actually true or not. These people are like really into it though.
well, there is a connection here between 4chan, 8chan, Anonymous,
Hmm.
and the Q. It's been bridged by George News largely, but the person behind George News, he's an actual White House connected political operative.
Yeah.
And he is the one behind one of the Q trip codes. Like we've identified
Uh-huh.
which drops that he's made. We have that in our deep dive research. So there's a team of people behind the Q PsyOp, but his background personally, he goes back to Project Chanology, to Anonymous doxing
Yeah,
Scientology.
yeah.
So we're talking that
And
about how
and
Q himself, or one of the Q persons, has been this hacker, this black hat hacker for 15 years.
yeah. Well, they call this whole net project, they call it Project Mayhem 2012, and a lot of that involves the Chanology stuff. And a lot of people thought QAnon was I forgot the guy who started 8chan. They thought it was his son because all the QAnon stuff, like the board started on 8chan, and they are ran by a like an online publishing group that does several other influential sites of like in this sphere or whatever. But it's the developers on that who are also tied into this like Cicada Group, Project Mayhem, and there's like a lot more. That's why I just need to send you the notes.
Send me the notes and I'll do a deep dive onto this
Yeah.
because I'm very interested because like as I said earlier, the person who introduced me to the prospiracy and the white hats
Uh-huh.
fighting that person,
It was probably one of the Game 23 guys.
well, it was him and some military intel person who were just like they wouldn't go live, but they would talk to me offline
Yeah.
and they were trying to get me to they were trying to get me they tried to get me onto Team Q and I was intransigent. And when I
Yeah.
refused to follow Q, it was like half our Discord server left with these people and I thought, wow, this has got to be some kind of an op. And I think we've been vindicated.
Yeah. So like this Tyler AI they talk about, some of these people genuinely believe that AI, like advanced AI, was actually created in the 90s and escaped a type of Faraday cage or a series of, and has been kind of like guiding or running the internet. And these people just happened upon like deeper levels of that and ways you can influence it. And
Well,
that's like their whole, that's like what they feel is going on. And a lot of these people are self proclaimed Discordians, if you know what that is.
sure, sure.
Yeah,
Discordians are, I guess you would kind of call them like almost like change agents, but they are people who are aware of the machinations of secret societies, not part of the official pyramid, but they're kind of independently trying to
yeah,
wreck the old order. They worship Eris, the goddess of chaos.
right,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
And the movement goes back to the 50s with like Robert Antoine Wilson and all the psychedelia stuff, and it was kind of like pre-internet, like they were trying to make memes and like trying to boost the power of that, I guess.
yeah,
You
absolutely.
know how absurdist ideas can like creating chaos can kind of loosen up soil as far as like if people's thoughts were that and you can replant stuff.
Well, James
And of course
Cameron,
all the
the
yeah.
director Cameron was saying a few months ago that if Skynet were real, if some artificial
Uh-huh.
intelligence were to get a hold of the situation, it would probably get rid of us by using deep fakes to put us at war with one another,
Yeah.
and specifically, it would get us to destroy one another without destroying the planet.
I mean, with all this stuff, you could argue that, and the difference between Terminator and I guess how it might actually play out is it's not like an overnight thing. It might happen just like how you're seeing, I guess. If that were the case, I don't know.
That is what
But
he said. He said it would look
yeah,
exactly as things look right now. And I think he was trying to
yeah,
be
okay.
hyperbolic, but you can take it literally because we are quite
Well,
literally looking at deep fakes, and psychological operations are deep fakes. They're deep faking reality. And that is what they do.
yeah. And these, like talking about cicada, coming back to that, that's at the core, like the people spreading that, that's kind of what they believe in an essence. Like just from what I've observed, and these people are all over Twitter too. It's not just the groups I mentioned, or not even ones I have in my notes.
Okay, you mentioned
They're all over. They're all
Discordianism.
over the place, and
Like, for people to
yeah,
understand that, I think you could just look back at the Pepe the Frog and the
uh-huh.
meme magic, the whole Keck phenomenon, where they were looking at
Yeah,
synchronicities and patterns suggesting that the
Oh yeah.
frog was a manifestation of an ancient Egyptian deity, and they acted like it was real, and then weird things would
I'm pretty sure,
happen. Yeah, that's
and I'm pretty sure Keck wasn't Keck a chaos god
something
of
like that.
sorts.
And
Okay.
so to me, it's like, okay, well, I think what we're seeing here is um, people consciously playing with the technology that the media itself is, I think, rooted in, which is this concept
Yeah.
that we call magic, which isn't really as simplistic or even a childish concept. We're talking about manipulation of individual minds and mass minds under the presupposition
Right.
that they're somehow manipulating reality through the human conduits. And I think that's the whole loosh idea is built into this.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, people call them elites or whatever you call them. A lot of people argue that they're trying to get it to a point where they don't even need to actively tell stories anymore. They can make a machine that does it, like a dream machine, you
Well,
know.
the Hollywood strikes right now, a big part of it is they realize they can be
Yeah.
scanned and replaced. And if you've messed with
Uh-huh.
Midjourney, you type in some words, it gives you some images. It's like it works like the
Yeah,
imagination works when you as you watch it render. And I'm like, okay, I could see
exactly. Yeah.
a few prompts turning into a full-blown movie in just a few
Hmm.
years. Like, this is not an exaggeration if you worked with ChatGPT
Oh yeah.
and what it can do.
Well, I remember when it was just Google Deep Dream, and even back in like 2017, 2016, I kind of figured out where like it's going to go in the direction it has been going. Um, but yeah, I'm sending you these notes right now.
Yeah, please send me those notes because what we're I think that this is all very fascinating to me, this whole idea of these cryptic groups getting entire communities around them.
Yeah,
I mean, who knows who they're in touch with, but
it, it's like a whole underground network, and then like you have this side of it, kind of what I'm naming, doing these ARGs and probably a lot of other stuff. I think they do a lot of illegal things, and then there's other groups that like are networked amongst like Telegram and Discord that do like swatting procedures on like um, people on the right or left, like people who are on the internet have internet presence, and it's not just one; it's like several, and you could probably write volumes about just all these people's activity, but it's totally well hidden and like subsurface.
right.
But it's kind of it's right under your nose as well.
Well, we have a lead here, like our chat, this think tank in particular. We have a direct connection to someone who is in Trump's inner circle, who is part of the Q operation, and he's known to people like
Right.
Joe Rogan, Alex Jones. Like, we're pretty close to ground zero of where the Wars like center of activity is. It's like
Yeah.
and it's pretty clear that yes, this Q thing is a psyop and it's working very well. And I think we're
Right.
dealing with a lot of what we call phishing and social engineering,
Hmm.
and who knows what else. But one other thing, the person behind this Q thing or part of it and this George News thing, he's behind the Hunter Biden
Yeah.
laptop. So what I think they do is they
Yeah.
create these scandals where it gets millions and millions of truthers or MAGA people to invest millions of hours wasting their time looking through Hunter Biden's laptop. It keeps them engaged.
Right.
They've been engaged for years over something that's a big nothing burger. And I'm like, what's the point? Well,
Well,
that was the point.
it's like a carrot on a stick, kind of.
Yes,
I guess.
100%. It's a carrot on a stick. It's a
Yeah.
nothing burger. It's an endless supply of hopium that keeps them waiting for
Hmm.
the next hit. And it's been a big waste. The queue, as Les Luthor puts it, has held them in queue this entire time.
Yeah. A lot of people argue like that. They are manipulating like all these different kind of warfares, but also they come back on the other end and they use stuff like Trump or Q or any of the hopium stuff as like a pressure release valve, and you put pressure on and release it enough to where you can kind of, it's like guiding a blind dog or something. I don't know.
Well, there's some other aspects to Q that I find fascinating, which are the culty aspects, like for example, the prophecies that don't come true, which paradoxically bind the core group even closer against the non-believers.
Right.
So it's like it's actually better
Yeah.
if it doesn't come true. If JFK doesn't show up,
Mhm.
it's gonna somehow. make them believe even. It's gaslighting.
Yeah.
We're looking at broken
Yeah.
minds. It's mind control, but it's fascinating from an
Okay.
anthropological perspective. Someone wants to know if you have any thoughts on Nathan from Lift the Veil.
I watched a lot of Lift the Veil back in like 2019, so I'm probably pretty out of touch, and I can't remember a lot
Okay,
of
because
Lift the
apparently
Veil.
he had a
I used to
breakdown.
watch everything on D Live, so yeah,
Right, I
I
was
don't
yeah.
know.
D Live used to be great before January 6th, and they shut it down because people covered January 6th and streamed it there. But anyway, apparently
Funny how
Nathan's
that works.
he's a big cicada. He says he solved cicada. He said it last night or a couple nights ago. So something to look into
Yeah, I
there.
don't know. I've heard that from a lot of people, and I don't know what that means. You know.
Right, right. You know what? I'd have to look into your notes. So if you want to send them to me, I can also give you my email address. I'll post it in the chat. And I get
Yeah, I sent it from. I'm using an online number. I sent it from that to the number I'm calling into. Is that like the correct one?
yes, yes, absolutely. It's my new
Okay.
Skype
All
number.
right.
I just started it tonight, but it's going to enable me to maintain a pool of callers. And if people want to be in the caller queue without having to, ring in, I can just have you log in before we even start. But anyway, I appreciate the call very much, and I'll look through your
Hey, no
notes.
problem. My pleasure. Oh
Awesome.
yeah.
Thank you. Have a great
Thank you.
night.
Hey, you too. Bye.
Okay, and as I said, I know the Skype ringer is exceptionally loud. It's like their trademark. They won't let you remove it. They used to have the option where you could mute it, but it is there. It's not something I can get rid of, but I will get rid of it in the replays. Unless I can find some hack, which trust me, I'll be looking. Also, someone had remarked that my volume might be lower than the callers. I adjusted it real time. If it's not fixed, it will be fixed by tomorrow. I didn't blast out text alerts because I still want to make sure everything is running just perfectly. However, when we do, I think you'll see the number of callers will be insane. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. We were talking a little bit about Cicada. I'll have to look at those notes. I haven't followed Lift the Veil or his take on it, so I'm interested to see what that's going to be about. We're talking about some of the proto Q operations where people suddenly integrated online are now interfacing with shadowy government PSYOP agents in a whole new way, and really nobody was ready for it. So I've been doing a lot of research at the library, just analog going through books, and I found this book about movie directing, and it has a lot of interviews. And one of the interviews was with the writer director Richard Kelly, whose first script was Donnie Darko. And listen to this, because I think this is intriguing. Think about Donnie Darko, 9/11 predictive programming. It came out on 119. Its marketing materials had to be removed because it had falling plane parts. It's just replete with predictive programming for 2020 for 9/11. It's an intriguing movie all around. Donnie Darko's even in many ways an allusion to Donald Trump. But we're talking about the director and a movie that came out before 9/11, which I contend was directed by Stanley Kubrick, who also is part of NASA, which is really about mind control and not about space travel. But listen to this. What did your parents do? Richard Kelly says, my dad started out working for NASA. Like, that's just what I wanted to point out. His dad worked for NASA. The father of the director of Donnie Darko connected to Mind Control Central. And I say that because everything indicates, and Kubrick's the key here, that the Psywar isn't just fake shootings, it's not just fake space, it's your entire world view. That's why they showed you Gaia, the blue marble. A big clue here is Riley's Coffee, where Oswald was working before the shooting. That's a big clue, which we talked about a few days ago. Elephant Tusk says Q is actually Quetzalcoatl, aka Thoth, which would be the Egyptian version of Mercury. Q is also a Star Trek character. I think that Q is also like it's the like I said the Quran. And also think about you can't separate it really from quarantine and there's something about Q that I think it's templated that it just makes me think it's a religion and always was. I mean, it's a holy war. And not only is it a holy war, but it's premised on blood libel. It's premised on a synagogue of Satan, a deep state. It's just a rebooted version of so many aspects of so many religions and cults, not to mention Trumpism. And Trump, who again was promoted from Jesus to Moses. So Skill here says Q is a malicious, dehumanizing, false rescue psychological warfare operation, state-sponsored terrorism. I agree with that. Jim Stewartson, who's been debunking or fighting Q forever, is convinced that the people who become part of it are traumatized by the imagery they're shown with hurt children. They're traumatized by the idea that there are children below the ground that need to be rescued, that it's actually appealing to their instincts to protect children, which is a very strong instinct. Like I talk about this a lot, how the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, is just there to tell you that the sky is falling, that you made God mad and you're going to get a flood. But it's with a scientific context. Your fossil fuel usage is going to bring about Armageddon, apocalypse, or end of the world. And I'm suggesting here that the Noah's flood, whether it's the archaic Old Testament one or the new scientific Noah's flood, that these are both appealing to primal fears, deep-rooted fears about judgment, the sky daddy, etc. And I kind of think that the Q thing is tapped into some, instinctual fears. Protect the tribe. What else do they always scare you about? The water's been poisoned, poisoning in the well. These are just old, I think, various types of conspiracy theories that demagogues use to mobilize frightened masses. And that's what we see, demagoguery on both sides. Salty Siren says Q is a holding cell. Yeah, think about it too. It's a pacifier and it's a holding cell. It actually looks like a pacifier, the circle and the line. And I said this because if you think about it, since 2020, the only resistance to the New World Order have been basically tweeting and eating popcorn. And now they're in no condition to go win a civil war. They were too slow. On January 6th, they were too slow to stop the certification. Like, there were a lot of them there, and they couldn't stop it. They couldn't get to Pence. They couldn't carry out any of it. They couldn't get the guns through the metal detectors. Like, that's just because they were out of shape. They were fattened up with nothing but truth or chicken feed and popcorn. Lean Dion says Operation Trust is notable, specifically that fake anti-establishment movement just to get the names and numbers, just to frame them all, which they did. And one more point here, as far as January 6th, and if you don't know about Wu's News, we're going to do some coverage of Wu's News' latest piece. He basically deconstructed January 6th like nobody else. It didn't happen. It was a psyop. Every single January 6th prisoner, what are we going to call them? I think what are they calling them? They're suggesting that these are like political prisoners. Well, look, they're all crisis actors. Okay, continuing through your comments. Stacy here says, you're correct. They keep all in a circle hamster wheel doing nothing under... Yeah, exactly. They've been spinning their wheels. Like, Save the Children 2015. It's urgent. Well, now it's 2023. It's almost 2024. They're not children anymore. They're old enough to vote, and they're voting for Joe Biden. Like, you lost. Not you guys, but the people who had their hopes up. But here's one other point. Because if you thought that this was an attempt by Trump to change history or to fix things, you're mistaken. It was scripted to fail. It was scripted this way. In fact, I just saw something incredible. There's a Brothers Grimsby movie where It's called The Brothers Grimsby, and it was released on 3/11/2016, so 4 years before COVID. And in this movie, Trump is in a stadium, and a bullet goes towards him, and it looks like he's about to get shot, and he's surrounded by this like red spray, because I think the bullet went through like somebody's beverage, and it shows the bullet going into his mouth, and then you see his bloodstream. Now, again, I'm just pointing this out because the blood spatter or the red spatter over Trump's face with the bullet in a movie from 3/11/2016, Brothers Grimsby, it looks exactly like the Illuminati playing card, Enough is Enough. You know, the one about the sniper? Just some incredible predictive programming. Again, the point of this is that the predictive and concurrent programming shows you that there's nothing that wasn't scripted. Like, nothing is off script. Nobody's rogue if they're on the world stage. Unless you still think that Alex Jones isn't there simply to focus on specific events so you don't see the big picture. You know, he's there to keep you focused on individual trees so you don't notice the forest. Ollie Goering says Ballard promised rescue children will give a tell-all interview next year. It's in one of the movie interviews with Jim Carbizal. Probably crisis actors. Look, the political left has their actors, the right has their actors. The left gets paid by GoFundMe. That's where their crisis actors get crowdfunded GoFundMe. The right-winger crisis actors like Daniel Penny get Give, Send, Go money. Pretty sure Tim Ballard probably gets Give, Send, Go. Nico Trauma says Alex Jones fighting for the people. Yeah, well, I mean, where do we even start with that? The whole thing is he got sued for $1 trillion over Sandy Hook, and the thing is he didn't do a thing to call out the Psy War. They hyper-focused on the one event when, in the meantime, from 2012 to 2023, we've had dozens of fake events that are way more debunkable than that one. Sandy Crook. But they turned that one into a sacred cow, and they try to use that as a cudgel to basically badmouth or attack anybody who questions. I mean, I pointed this out a couple years ago. When they stopped saying conspiracy theorist, they started calling you conspiracists. And if you look at it in the headlines, it looks like conspiracist. They do nothing but hit jobs to make the people who question things look crazy. I just saw a pretty decent, kind of a short biographical memorial piece on Mac Parhar, who, if you didn't know, Mac Parhar, who supposedly, I mean, some people don't believe he's dead. Believe what you want. Who knows? You know, I wasn't there. Is it fakeable? Yes. Whatever it is, though, in this, it was showing how he was constantly speaking out against the lockdowns, bucking the rules. He kind of made himself into a pariah, like the main enemy of the Canadian government. He was just flouting all their rules. But his yoga studio was the first business in the world to be, I guess, shut down for refusing to close. I don't know if any of you watched it. I just watched it a little while ago. I don't really have any specific opinions on whether he was an actor or not. It almost doesn't matter at this point. But there are clues if you want to look. But I just know for a fact, like, if I were to die tonight, nobody would believe it. But that wouldn't happen. I mean, I guess it could, but how would you convince anybody? That's the craziest thing. I guess somebody would have to actually go to the morgue. But I'm not a death faker. I wouldn't do it. I think it's very unethical, and I kind of think that you would lose out in the end. You know, imagine going undercover or, you know, selling out, and then later on, you know, your cover gets blown or something. How many crisis actors have gone undercover or have to live? Like, for example, the Jurassic 5, I'm not sure. But if you look at Jurassic 5, it kind of looks like Tupac and his whole crew from back then have resurfaced. But it's like, wow, you went from this very famous role to this kind of underground thing. Is it a demotion? Like I'm just saying, crisis actors have no representation. They don't have their ability to protest. All right, let's continue here. 777 says there were a lot of flags about F.E. Foker. Yeah, again, he was someone who went into hospitals, though. That was the thing. When the lockdown started, most people got their information from their sources through their screens at home. But I was like, you know what? We need to get our press passes and we need to go into the hospitals. We need to go into the parking lots and see, are they as full as they say? And time and again, we were proving that the hospitals were empty. Parhart walked through hospitals, even wearing PPE. PPE. So, you know, sometimes it's hard to tell if somebody's just really good controlled opposition or they're uncontrolled opposition. People probably think we're controlled op. Well, actually, no. Like the other day, Tim Pool put out this X, or what do we call them? Tweets? Is it still tweets? He tweeted that Fox News is controlled opposition. And my response was Tim Pool is controlled opposition to the controlled opposition. Okay, 777 says it was like he was low key trying to tell us he was about to exit the stage. Yeah, I have to say that in the days leading up to his supposed death, he seemed very healthy. But then, whenever he would talk about his health, he would start coughing all of a sudden. And I was like, this sounds like some kid faking sick from school. Like, I didn't buy it. And the fact that the number one anti lockdown activist would die of COVID and then the Daily Beast would just mock him for it, that's just so predictable. And we were predicting it. In fact, I think I called his death a week before and I said, watch, he's going to get the convid like the other guy did, and he's going to be on the Daily Beast. And that did happen. So there's a reason why a lot of people find it hard to believe. And just because people cry doesn't mean somebody died. If they're not, I mean, it's if you really believe it, it's easy to cry. Think about all those auto-believing blue pill mainstream mediated dupes who cry watching the news because they think it's real. Sad. Okay, going through some comments. 777 says he went into some building after his Richie from Boston car vlog. People in the building were treating him in a very weird way as if they were playing along. Yeah, I guess one more point here is that the concept of death faking is just, it's like simple, like in spycraft. You're just talking about fake backstories, fake entrances, fake exits. It's not all that complex. And there were a lot of influencers who really tapped out, I think, the whole grift that there was to be made in anti-vax, and they all suddenly died of the COVID. And they served as examples. Hey, look, misinformation kills. Like, I think these are sellouts. Like, they serve as examples. Some even went so far as to say his name was an anagram for, like, pharmacos, like, which, like, like the sacrificial goat, perhaps. And the goat, of course, the scapegoat is the one that takes on the sins of the village and then it's kicked out, it's exiled. Well, that's kind of what we saw there. We saw somebody being a scapegoat to represent the entire community. He was lambasted, he was attacked by the media nonstop, and then he was disappeared, taking with him the sins of the village. I mean, it seems kind of like that. It seemed like a scapegoat story. So many COVID denier deaths. Now, I look, and you might think I'm cold for this, but I'm so sure that these people are so cynical that I literally think that that he faked his mom's death on a live stream, that she didn't really die because she wouldn't get the horse paste, that it was a staged psyop, and he used that as sort of like an emotional tie-in when he first got into the circuit. So now he's on Alex Jones. He talks about it. He talks about it on Tim Pool. Like, I think he's a crisis actor, and I think that was fake. Is that bad? And by the way, he was at Uvalde. Alex Stein went to Uvalde, and he yelled at the city council because the police didn't save the kids. And then he went to the big pile of teddy bears, and he cried. And I sent him a tweet, a private message, and I said, hey, Alex, fake dead kids' lives don't matter. And he blocked me. He blocked me. But like as far as I'm concerned, they don't matter. If you think that fake dead people's lives matter, you're not paying attention to the real people who are being targeted with psychological warfare operations incessantly. And these psychological operations are forms of emotional abuse, psychological abuse, gaslighting. It's not merely influence operations like marketing. This is stuff that's meant to, change you, change your world. Okay, I'm going through some comments. Lots going on here. 82 people in chat. Not bad considering we haven't sent out the text alerts. Now, I like Tim Pool's channel. I like a lot of their conversations. I listen to his podcast. But these people are reality impaired. You realize that Tim Pool thinks that Boston Dynamics videos with the dancing robots, he thinks those are real. Like, in other words, like most people, his frame of reference is if it's on the screen, it's real. But because he's kind of a fringe as far as the mainstream media ecosystem, or I was going to say ecosystem, echo chamber, ecosystem, that he's still using the frame of reference that everyone else uses, but then he adds a little bit, or he believes a little extra. Mainstream mediated minds are pretty much happy, contented. They're given this dream world where they're just going with the flow. But the people who go a little further, who go out onto these other fringes, yeah, they just have a little extra sauce thrown on top of that. They're not like truthier. They haven't seen through the matrix. They're not deconstructing. They're actually just deeper in the mud. So when he sees this video of these Boston Dynamics robots dancing around and he's like, oh, wait until they start killing us, I'm like, you do realize that's fake, right? But the answer is no. And I'm just saying that this is a symptom of a deeper philosophical crisis that's encompassing the entire world. Because if it was just him that thought cartoons were real, you'd put him in an asylum, give him some shots. But since everybody thinks cartoons are real, we live in an open asylum, and those of us who can see it are the ones considered insane. It's Alice in Wonderland, and everything's just inverted. Joined by Psyobstacle, says CGI robot canines. Yeah, he's afraid of cartoon robot dogs. Michael Gumond says, you're back. Oh yeah, not only are we back, we have a headquarters. In fact, tonight, I'm going to record a short video, or I'll take some pictures. I'll do a 360 of the IPS headquarters here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. New phone number, where you can leave voicemails, 1-505-349-0420. We are expanding into e-commerce. I have a hot link. Go to timosmond.art to go to the eBay store, where we are selling publications, and we're getting back into print. So we're definitely back, but we're also moving into the next phase. So I said crawl, walk, run. We've been crawling for months. We're entering the walk phase. Run is when our reporters get activated, and there's more than 160 people carrying press passes right now. Nicotramus says, we live in an open asylum, spitting some hard truths tonight. Yeah, it is true. There's been some, I'm not going to say psychological damage, but there is some of that insofar as fundamentalist religions damage people psychologically. But there is a philosophical issue here, and it's by design. We do live in something of a new dark age. I call it endarkenment. Like, we're moving into a darker age. We might have better tech. We might have higher standards of living. Things are more sanitary. People are wearing masks or something. But when it comes down to it, the direct knowledge is being replaced by subjective beliefs. That's why I'm like, there's no way the Mandela effect's going to last, because the world stage effect is far more severe. You're like, yeah, Ed McMahon never did that. And people are like, okay, so you have one glitch. Everybody lives in a subjective universe. It's just not going to have an impact. Like I'm looking on Twitter, and people choose what to believe, and then they retweet it if they accept it. They have these like patchwork realities. It's incredible. Build your own reality. Choose your own reality. All right, let's see here. There was something I want to bring up. Oh, yes, I wrote a blog piece about that new Netflix movie and I watched it. They cloned Tyrone, and this is another example of concurrent programming where Jamie Foxx has been the subject of speculation over his health. He dies and he's resurrected on set. I talked about this back in April and how he ties into this bigger story of BLM martyrs, specifically Tyree Nichols, and how Tyree Nichols represents Hiram Abiff. We're talking about the Masonic theater encoded into these martyr psyops that form the core of BLM. This is just a subject of our conversations going back a few months. But Jamie Foxx is central to this because of his role with the Trayvon Martin's protests, his role in the movie Django Unchained. Not an insignificant figure in this. But just the other day, he puts out a video saying he says that he's not cloned and that he's doing fine. And then this movie comes out starring Jamie Foxx, and it's called Tyrone Was Cloned. So the symbolism here, a lot of it has to do with Tyrone, Tyree. The cloning is just another way of saying resurrected. Anyway, the movie itself is rather good. It has all the best elements of Westworld, Truman Show. It's got a lot of Kubrick references. And I'm not going to give out any spoilers because it's actually got some profound messaging that I think might be worth deconstructing later when everyone's had a chance to watch it. But I'm just saying here that this drama around Jamie Foxx was all to market this movie, in addition to the other levels of communication going on here tied to BLM. And it's probably not a coincidence either that the movie does have, I think, a subtext that supports this. It's probably not a coincidence either that the Jason Aldean song, Try That in a Small Town, is trending, because that was a call out to BLM. So there's something brewing. But just to recap, I watched the movie. They cloned Tyrone. Excellent movie. It's actually so well crafted. I don't want to give any spoilers, but it has some very, very deep stuff. So if you think it's if you can't tell what it is in the first few minutes, you just have to wait. I sat through the whole thing and honestly, very impressed. A lot of Kubrick references, Clockwork Orange stuff, very well thought out. Going through your comments, Cy Obstacle says, Skippy peanut butter, Jiffy popcorn, Jif not Jiffy. It was the 80s. You had to be there. Yeah, where are the new Mandela effects? Where are the new ones? They're going to have to, like I said, hold some Mandela effect conferences, have some meetups, hopefully have some families, some babies, raise them as Mandela affected, because at this point, it's just going to die off. Like the last person, maybe it'll be Stavely. He'll be the last one. It's like, I'm the last one. They're like, look, this is the guy. He's from a splinter universe. He's a timeline jumper. Last of his kind, going extinct. He comes from the world where his underwear has a cornucopia on it. It's not there anymore, but it was there, and he swears to it. 777 says, Manduzel's getting boring. We need new gaslights. Well, people self-gaslight themselves all the time. But we have a cure. We actually have Mind War Inoculation. It's free. You just go to infiniteplane.live, click the link, and listen. It's sort of like that movie Hot Skull, but instead of passing mind viruses verbally that turn people crazy, we're actually passing the cure. Okay, well, I'm glad the phones work. This computer that I'm using right now, it's been around for a while. It's got a few dents in it, but it can do the job. Now, the 24-hour stream is going to be regularly updated. The chat's going to be lit, and we're going to be on many more platforms. But I'm going to just take another day here to check the audio levels, see how everything went, because this has been a test. And if everything goes well, then tomorrow we enter the run phase of this thing, and we'll do the morning deep programs and the late night phones, and we'll get a lot more people calling in. I can pretty much guarantee it. And I have some guests lined up. I have so much more to cover, obviously, but we started late. I want to say thanks again to everyone who helped set the headquarters up. I'm going to take some pictures and I'm going to send them. So get on the newsletter, infiniteplane.live or ips.monster. I'll send some photos of the headquarters. Just a few more updates, but a few little upgrades here at the office. But for the most part, it's ideal. And I live in a 1-minute city. And I structured it this way so there's no excuse. I won't have any obstacles. Doesn't matter if there's snow or anything like that. I can just walk across the street and I have a controlled environment. We have our base of operations, and we also have a conference room with a huge dry erase board. And I look forward to some of the wall-sized mind maps that we're going to be working on here in the very near future. Anyway, thanks for joining. Appreciate everyone. I'll put a link below, and we'll see you all in the Discord chats.